So right now we'll move on to our next respective session, in which the second session is called Malaysia, the Way Forward Tax Reform. I do believe this is going to be a very interesting session as well, and I would like to also let you guys know this session will be moderated by Yahya bin Mat Hassan, who is the chairman and advisory board of Malaysia Corruption Board, and the panelist is Muhammad Zakaria bin Othman, the general manager of Head of Big Data Management, TFX Islamic, Amarjit Singh, the managing partner of Asian Tax Earners and Young Tax Consultants in Malaysia, as well as Regan Cannon, tax controversy partner of Danish Ringa and Association Tax. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for all these four individuals right here who will be taking all of us on a journey in this second panel session.
Assalamualaikum. Welcome to session 2. We will be discussing, as indicated by the MC, Malaysia, the Way Forward Tax Reform. As have been introduced by the MC, I would not repeat that. However, I am proud to say that we cannot have a better team to discuss tax reform in Malaysia. Can you please welcome all our distinguished panel members? So the first panel speaker is, let me invite Mr. Amarjit Singh. The question is, when discussing tax reform in Malaysia, could you please give a brief outline of the reforms that are taking place? In addition, please share with us the changes happening within the perspective of changes in philosophies. You cannot have any reform without any philosophy. If time permits, would you like to share the possible strategies to be considered? Please indicate ways on how to create awareness on the significance of tax reform. Over to you, Mr. Amarjit Singh.
Thank you, Tonya. And thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for having me here today. It's a little bit of an echo sound. Okay. So quite a number of heavy questions, but he was very kind. He raised the questions much earlier, and I had the chance to. Okay, better? Okay, sorry. Okay, so if someone is controlling the slide, right? Thank you. If I can just ask for the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So maybe allow me to, there's still the echo sound, if you don't mind. Thank you, Tuan. Okay, I think much better. Okay, all right. So maybe let me take it in 3 steps. One, to set the scene in terms of what's happening. In terms of we've gone through the pandemic. There's still uncertainty. Number 2, what are the trends that we are seeing out there? And lastly, if I may, just share my thoughts on tax reform. So starting off, I think, from 2018, we've, at least in our lifetime, we've seen one of the most challenging pandemic across. And this time around, governments across the world responded, I will say, very quickly and in a very big way, right? So Malaysia is not the only country. Majority of the countries responded with massive stimulus measures and to do 2 things. One, I think to save lives, and number 2, to save livelihoods. So if you go through the measures, it was always about the individual and making sure vaccines were made available, making sure that health was priority. And of course, at the same time, businesses, to help businesses stay afloat and meet the challenges of the various lockdowns that we all went through. Okay, so that was the start, and very quickly moving as we come out of the pandemic, as borders start to open, the government shifted their focus on recovery of the economy. And in Malaysia it's no different. I'm sure you've heard about the Penjana incentives and many other initiatives to spur economic recovery. And now basically where are we? And now we hear, right, in the media, and the session here today, we hear about the fiscal balance. We hear about the status of the debt to GDP. So these are now coming up, right? Because we've gone out of the lockdowns, we are in recovery, and now we have the time to look into, we need to look at the longer term sustainability of our economy and of our fiscal position, right? And here now we hear about how do we raise taxes? Okay, how do we raise taxes? Really, it's not so much about raising taxes, it's really about ensuring that we have sufficient tax revenue to fund the development expenditure and also the operating expenditure of our nation. And these themes are common, it's not specific to Malaysia. If I may ask for the next slide. Okay, now, with that background, what are the other things we see across that, in my humble view, has an impact on tax reform? Okay, so you've heard about emerging from COVID. There's also this big thing called BEPS 2.0, and I'm sure Dato' Nizam mentioned it earlier this morning as well in his opening address. How Malaysia is part of the inclusive framework. We are a trading nation, we cannot operate by ourselves. So if there are changes out there by the OECD, we need to be part of it, right? And I'm not going to bore you with the details of BEPS 2.0, but maybe just reiterate one of the things that I think Dato' mentioned earlier this morning, which is the Pillar 2, which is really about having a level playing field, about minimum 15% tax. That's going to have a massive change. Pillar 1, although we think that it has a lesser impact to us, nevertheless it is a game changer. Okay, when I grew up in the tax fraternity, the basic rule of tax was you need to have a presence in a country to be taxed. Okay, this rule is going to take all of that away. Because you don't need, and it's not because the tax guys suddenly got very excited, it's because the businesses change, right? Today, in the past, businesses need to be in a country physically in order to do business. But today, you don't need to. Netflix doesn't have to have a presence in Malaysia to get access to the many of us in Malaysia who actually subscribe to Netflix. So the rules are the rules need to change to ensure that each jurisdiction gets its fair share of tax. And that's going to drive tax reform. It's a big change. Third, now, thanks to the pandemic, the whole global supply chain, you've heard, I'm not the first one saying this, supply chain got disrupted, right? Companies are really looking at how they structure, how they design their supply chain. And that also presents opportunities for governments like Malaysia to ensure that we get maybe a slightly bigger share of the cake in terms of FDIs coming into our country. I'm sure we want that, right? And then the other thing that I think the pandemic gave maybe not give birth to, but more accelerated the whole process was digitization. Many of our corporations, although we talked about digitalizing our functions, the way we operate for many years, but thanks to COVID, this all got done in a much faster pace. Now it's not just the corporates, the governments are doing the same, because the governments also felt that, during the pandemic, we were in a lockdown and certain parts of the government couldn't function as how they used to, right? Hence, there's a lot of investments that is going into the digital space as well, including tax, and I'll touch that in a bit, right? And with all of this, with change and with uncertainty, the one thing that is surely going to increase is the space of controversy, the tax controversy, the disputes. Now, this is a given, and it's really for both sides, the government side and also the taxpayer side, in terms of how to manage. Now, this is basically the changes that are happening, whether we like it or not. And when we look at tax reform, we need to manage this. We need to be aware of this, right? So we know that we are emerging from COVID, hence now we need to balance the fiscal position. We've got BAPS, we need to change our laws to cater for it, but cater for it in a way that benefits Malaysia, so that we can continue to have the right investments and we continue to be able to get the right tax. Okay? Global trade, again, the same thing. How do we make sure that we get our fair piece of the FDIs? Digital is changing. Both sides need to take advantage of it, right? Okay. Next, please. Now, you heard from the earlier session about our tax to GDP ratio. Professor Dr. Yong mentioned. Now, it's the same thing, but it's presented slightly in a different manner. And what I've done is I've looked at GDP ratio for Malaysia versus its neighboring countries. Actually, personally, I don't think we're too bad. I mean, it sounds low. If I look at the number, we are sitting at 11.4, but our closest neighbor down south, the same report, of course, the reports, different years, the numbers could be different. If you look at Singapore, it's 12.6, not way off, okay? So surely there is space for us to do better, but I know a lot of us focus on this in terms of, are we collecting the right amount of revenue and, the whole works, right? But I think everything in balance. That's my learning from this. Because if you look at the OECD numbers, they're going to be looking at 30% to be best in class or gold standards, and I will get very worried if Malaysia says that we want to go there. Each country has got its different state of maturity. I think we just need to do things in balance. Okay, next. So now, against this background, this is my 2 cents in terms of where I think we should be focusing on reforms, tax reforms. Number one, I think increasing the tax revenue, for sure, we need to do it. But I feel it should be through 2 things. I'm not going to touch on broadening the tax base. The earlier session had already covered that. But what I want to cover here is really through the use of technology. I'm sure you had the privilege of hearing Dr. Newsom earlier this morning about e-invoicing, about e-reporting. Many countries have done it, and I've had the chance and privilege to visit some of these countries. It's amazing. It's amazing what this can do. And if I may just pick an analogy from the OECD paper on digital tax administration version 3.0, it is basically a shift from today. If I may use an example, today we drive the conventional cars. There are rules. We need to learn how to drive. We need to learn how to follow the rules. But whether we follow the rules depends on us. So in the middle of the night, at 11 o'clock at night, it's a red light, there's no police car watching. Some of us may decide not to follow the rule. Right? I'm sure many of us do not. Some of us do, some of us not. Okay? The same for tax today, because we don't have e-invoicing, we don't have e-reporting. Whether we declare income to some extent, it is up to us. And we use the term voluntary compliance. And we've heard about cases you heard about shadow economy, you heard about leakages, because there is still an element of whether we want to comply 100% or not. And especially if there's an area where people are not watching, there's a way out, I just don't declare the income. With e-invoicing, it changes to what we call a driverless car, right? So in the world of a driverless car, the car is designed in such a way that it has to comply with all rules. The driver can't do anything, even if he wants to, or he or she wants to. So the same in the world of e-invoicing and e-reporting, that bit about voluntary compliance gets taken out. It is compliance by design. The system takes care of it. And I was not there, but one of my colleagues, close friend now in Mexico, actually showed his tax return that he could get, not in tax return, his transactions from the Mexican Tax Administration website. So he just keyed in his name, keyed in his whatever number, and in there, my God, the tax authorities had details of what he did last night. You know, what he spent for dinner, where he went to. It was amazing. Now, can you imagine if you have such a system? I know some of us are going to get scared. But from an increasing tax revenue perspective, if that's the objective, then this is the way to go. Okay? 2, I think we need to have clarity. Time's running out, right? Okay. I think we need to have clearly articulated and publicized investment policy. Which are the target investments that we need to have? Why are they in relation to tax reform? I think the third point will tell you that we then need to have targeted incentives. So I'm not one who say, let's be done with incentives. I think we need to rethink. We need to review. It will still have a play, notwithstanding BEPS 2.0. The form might change from fiscal to maybe subsidies to grants. I mean, the propagators of the minimum tax, if you go to their countries and you look at how they support investments, actually it's going to become even more complex for a country like us in Malaysia. Because then they talk about cash grants. We've never been very strong in this space. Now the difference between a tax incentive and a cash grant is a corporate needs to make profits to enjoy the tax benefit. When it comes to cash grant, it comes up front whether you make a profit or not. So it's more expensive. So all I'm saying is we need to acknowledge that there will be spaces where we need to have incentives, but we need to be much, much more savvy, much, much more smarter, and much, much more agile. Okay? I think changes to tax policy, I think the Ministry of Finance is doing a fantastic job. Last year we had a pre-budget statement, this year we had one. I think upfront early engagement is the way to go. Okay? A more transparent system, okay, simpler and a more transparent system. And this is where I'm going to put forward an idea which I've never done in Malaysia, but it's done in other countries. Maybe for certain smaller corporates, smaller ones, and we can think about the threshold, maybe they don't need to do the traditional way of computing tax returns, you know, income, then we make adjustments, complex, complicated. Maybe for them, it's just an upfront tax of X% on revenue. Many countries have it. Malaysia will not be the first one. And this is simpler, easier to administer, and minimizes leakages if we combine it with the e-invoicing and e-reporting. Okay. Let's not forget about our environmental, social, and governance aim. So I think adopting a carrot and stick approach there. I still believe we should consider still either widening or giving reliefs to encourage the M&A space. So we've got stamp duty, we've got real property gains tax. These are complex tax rules. Even within what is within the legislation, it's still complex. It's not easy to get those exemptions. I think we need, this is now post-pandemic, we need to encourage those transactions to take place. I've just heard now there's a requirement to pay the stamp duty first and then get the exemption. I think we need to review this. Okay? And last point, no matter what we do, we need to have a longer term thinking. So it cannot be something like you introduce something today take it out tomorrow, bring it back on the third day. That's not the way to go. I think we need to have a longer term perspective in this space. This is serious stuff. Companies. The one thing that investors want, regardless of whether the investor is a local, domestic investor or foreign investor, is certainty. And I think the way the BEPS world is going, the investors' reliance on the tax administration and the Ministry of Finance in terms of clarity and certainty of the rules, and also the ability of the authorities to stand with them on the tax positions adopted, it's going to increase. And that's going to be a factor in choosing where to locate, where to invest. There are many factors, but this factor in the past maybe didn't exist. It will now be included. So I'll stop here. There are some slides which I'll share with you. It talks about how the invoicing world is getting bigger. There's a case study on Mexico on how they increased their tax revenue, or rather they doubled their tax revenue in a space of 6 years after introducing invoicing. You guys can have a look at it, at your leisure. Thank you, and back to you, Tuan.
Thanks so much, Mr. Ahmad Hussein. We have covered quite sensitive areas, and we can come back later on. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Renganathan. On the same, maintaining the theme of tax reform in Malaysia, could you highlight issues related to tax collection and tax evasion? Please share your thoughts on how to educate the public on the significance of tax compliance and possible irregular practices. Over to you.
Thank you, Tuan. Thank you, Zakaria, and good morning to everyone. Thanks to the organizers for arranging such an impactful panel. So, in the interest of time factor, I'm not going to repeat and not to avoid overlapping issues. So, next slide, please. Yeah. Now, back to Yaya's question: how we can educate, how we can build a sound taxpayer structure or community, right? So now when we say look at reformation, we really need a sound tax framework and structure, and this reformation is ongoing, constant process. It's not a 5-year plan, a 3 years plan, or 2 years plan. It should be an ongoing process. So in any country, it should be beneficial for the country and the community, people, local. The system must be a very efficient system and should enable to support advanced economy and also for the growth. Business today are very complex, so it should encompass and support the business people. And also to promote an efficient, equitable taxation system to enhance the taxpayers base. We already discussed on how to enhance taxpayers base. DG indicated very clearly by with future technology projects. So we go to the next slide, please. Early tax education. This is something very close to my heart. Early tax education, we're not looking at Form 4 or Form 5 because Form 4, Form 5 kids are busy with a lot of stuff. So at that point of time, we are going to teach tax to them. I think we are late. The best time is Standard 3, Standard 4. Standard 3, Standard 4 kids, if you happen to be, they're very bright. Nowadays, when there's a request for cheetah, nobody feels, I want to be an engineer, pilot, doctor. Accountant, no one feels. Unfortunately, no one feels accountant. But it's nice to see that I want to be a scientist, I want to be a psychologist, a lot of complex businesses, portfolio. In fact, they know better than us. So if we can teach them what is tax at very young age, rather than influencing them what is tax at very young age, I think we'll have a very good community where the kids will be teaching or influencing the parents and the community as well, that you bought a BMW, have you paid your taxes? if you don't pay taxes, I think I should not get into PNW. I mean, that's where we should. Too bad. Like my good friend say, at 11 p.m., someone wants to beat the traffic light. Of course, it's not a mistake, but if you want to obey the law, you should obey the law. I'm looking at, we should have a responsible citizens, responsible community. Too bad we missed the boat. Repetitively, every year, every panel, we are looking at the same base. Even the previous panel session, Doctor raised up very clearly, only 10% of employment category or individual categories are paying taxes. It's not a good indicator. We are 60 years old uncle. We got our independence 60 years ago. And we still have 10% taxpayers from individuals, which is out of 33x million population paying taxes. Not right. Only certain people are paying 5 figures, 6 figures, maybe 7 figures. The rest is having a long-term honeymoon, right? So this is one of the best way to move on. And yeah, next. Digitalization. Of course, we are in self-assessment system from 2000 and full e-filing system from 2005. Based on data, what I understand is in 2009, which is close to 1/3, 28% individuals or taxpayers already actively started using e-filing. But today, e-filing is a wonderful system, very good system. DG mentioned earlier about my tax system. It's a good system. One dashboard. You can go in, you can see, very nice. Okay, 2019, what is your taxes? 20 is what is your taxes? 21 is what is your taxes? Penalties, whatever it is, everything is there. Nice. But it's not end-to-end digitalization. Because my business is controversy. I deal with controversy appeals on day-to-day basis. So my business is not digitalized. Now, when my business is not digitalized, I'm not saying that it's because of me. Now, disputes, disagreements, appeals, revisions is not a bad word. It's actually a healthy indicator. Disagreements make or form people matured, much structured, and way forward. If I've done a mistake, if we can establish this is a mistake, I'm not going to repeat it again. So, in the interests of time and cost for taxpayers and fellow Malaysians, someone from Sabah, if he want to go and file a Form Q, at his branch, probably he had to spend 2,003 or 2,008. It's a lot of money just to file an appeal. Why? Because it's a paper. You can ask me, why can't the tax agent do? We are small population, but our country is quite widespread. We really need end-to-end digitalization. Of course, we welcome e-invoicing, every digitalization project, but back end, once assessment has been raised or some disagreements has been raised by both parties, it has to be smooth as well. One end is smooth, another end, long way to go, it means it's not fair. So end-to-end should be fully digitalized, right? Now, when we say full digitalization, i.e. of course filing Form Q, filing EOT. Filing Form Q is one challenge, filing EOT is another challenge. Filing EOT extension of time is another challenge. Compliance of reason foreign source of income. The reason income tax order 5 and 6 of 2000, spelling mistake, typo error, my mistake, 2022. Even though it looks simple, actually there's so many things to be satisfied under the reason order. End of last year, we had a different impression. Another 5 more years, our year will be finished, but today we totally have a different impression, different ruling. But nevertheless, there's a lot of complication. Tax is not simple. It's always very sexy, very attractive. So to remain attractive, we need proper documentations as well. Right? And also, previous one, tax refund. Tax refund, past 2 years it's a ongoing issue. A lot of taxpayers are still waiting for a refund. And a lot of taxpayers are still waiting for refund. It's not easy to communicate officers. It's not easy to communicate officers. So we have to do something. I mean, one end is fully digitalized. Again, another end is not digitalized. So, masala. big problem, right? Yeah, next. Okay, dispute management in decided cases. This is back to my forte. As I said earlier, disagreement is not a bad indicator, it's not a wrong, no point throwing a blanket against disputes, right? But cases, decided cases at DRD, Dispute Resolution Department, Special Commission of Income Tax, is not available for public. Only very limited cases are available via IRB's website. So all these cases, if it is available for public, those non-valuable, or if they can do a simple risk matrix. If it is not really, it's not going to add any value, when it might not even going to file a farm Q. Life goes on, so you can manage the risk very smoothly. Likewise, I think at this point of time, businesses are very complex, and not necessarily income tax or government departments will understand every businesses very clearly. So there's a need to have some independent panel members to represent the business community at Dispute Resolution Department. Why? Because Dispute Resolution Department is a case management kind of solution, platform. So if we have a independent panel representative for businesses, I think it's vital and more inclusive. Right? Yeah. Next. Data transparency. Only today we know what is the collections, what is the target. We are talking about billions of money. So at least they can release IRB or MOF, they can release some sort of data range. Okay, this is my target, this is what we managed to achieve Q1, Q2, and what type of sectors we are going after, what type of scrutinization has been carried out, the types of taxes, types of penalties collected at least every 3 or 4 months. I think it will be a two-way communication. One, what IRB has achieved. Likewise, those people in grey market, those people who really doesn't know anything, that's what they claim, they would know, look, this is what we are doing, this data is that. So it's a two-way communication, active engagement, right? Next. Okay. Tuan, this is real answer for your question. We good tax agents don't really facilitate tax evasion. Tax evasion is, again, based on my personal opinion, based on my personal experience, easily 20-25% all these cases, all these disputes, taxpayers get into problem because of these people. Bogus tax practitioners. So IRB and of course IRB do monitor 153 section holders, license holders, okay? And I have to, the credit goes to IRB because I'm one of the trainer with IRB. We train more than 1,200 potential tax agents, and IRB given license for 200 tax agents across the country. So IRB is doing their part, but they are monitoring the tax agents. The question here is, whoever is not in the system, they are not being monitored. They are not being regulated. And IRB should not, including MF, they should not entertain these people stepping into the meeting room. Especially during 2018-2019, as per my knowledge, a lot of brokers actually came back again because SVDP, Voluntary Disclosure Program. So everybody came in. I'm the rep of this company, I'm the rep of this taxpayer. IRB should stop entertaining unauthorized and non-section 153 holders, strictly. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranganathan. That's all. That's great. Now we have our final panel member. Could Encik Zakaria, Muhammad Zakaria, please relate tax reforms from the level of operation with the application of new tools, instruments, technology, and it would be nice if you can relate to the IR4. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And a very good morning to all of you. Okay, I think to answer the question, I think the first part of the question in terms of the the operational level of tax reform in connection with the technology and with the IR. Maybe I can share with you all the slides. Okay, next please, next. Okay, as you know, tax has always been with us. And if you look at the historical or even biblical references, or even in Quran, I mean, zakah is a form of tax. And you see, as you can see that, and with the recent technologies, there have been massive implications on tax, on the operational part of tax process. And as mentioned by both of my esteemed panelists, the authorities, I mean, the industry has basically started to use technology as a tool for improvement. Okay, next please. But as I mentioned earlier, tax has always been with us. It's been like ages, but they are always being left out when it comes to fintech. And nobody talks about supply chain financing. Nobody talks about blockchain. But if you look at fintech now, I would say that it's all completed. But what about tax? They're still lacking, as per my fellow fellows saying that, they have some certain parts, they are technology, and certain parts, they are not technology. And this is basically the main obstacle in terms of fulfilling the reformation of the whole tax process. Because, okay, fine, I would say that, the tax, filling out the forms, and is perfect. But as mentioned, what's happening to my refund? And I thought I've got all this in, and what's happening, as what my fellow panelists saying, because it's like one-sided, because it's not end-to-end. It's not being applied in totality. Okay, next please. And okay, in order to look at how tax reforms, the operational side of it, we look at the macro trends, we look at the whole thing, which I think it should be a guide for us to move on. See, as you can see, the global regulations, they've been like, especially if I'm not mistaken, I've read something about the G20 was saying that there should be some sort of a minimal or minimum amount of tax imposition. Then they talk about the changing nature of work. As mentioned by my fellow colleague, saying that in order for you to be taxed, you have to be resident. So by virtue of the changing nature of work, you can have a remote working. So some organizations, some employees will say that, okay, fine, let's have somebody working somewhere which are not within the tax jurisdiction. So this is an area that we have got to look at. It's basically based in Malaysia, but they have somebody working somewhere in areas which are not taxable, kind of thing. Then another thing is just about the changing nature of work. Again, it's about the gig economy. You have these so-called self-employed kind of things. At least for those employed, the employers, the HR will help out in terms of the EA forms and those kind of things. And what about the gig economy? What about the gig players? What about those riders, those food panda, those kind of things? So how do you actually get those money from those people when they are actually making money? So these are the trends that we need to look at. And of course, I mentioned earlier in connection to that, the e-commerce arena. Then, of course, we're talking about sustainable, the GS and the ESG and this kind of thing. And last but not least, with this fintech, they have this crypto assets, which again is actually challenging for the tax authority to actually look at it. And how do I actually look at it? I mean, how do I assess the gains in terms of the exchanges? Okay, next please. And why am I stressing on tax tech? Not because I'm from the fintech company, and it's because, as you can see, that tax technology is very critical. We have got, I think my fellow colleague was saying about the digitization, the automation, and of course the cloud. We need somewhere to park it. We cannot be just like retrieving files over and over, and those kind of things. I like to relate this, especially those land officers, they've got stacks of files kind of thing, which I think the accessibility to data or information is always an issue. Next, please. And these are the, how shall I say, the technologies that can assist or empower the tech stack. You talk about artificial intelligence, you talk about the data collections, you talk about, again, blockchain, and also the natural and also the real-time digital compliance. Okay, next, please. As I mentioned earlier, actually tax and fintechs are all well connected. Although tax tag is considered a new kid on the block, but as you can see, they have the competitive advantage and to ensure the stickiness of the loyalty of the, as mentioned by our fellow panelists, saying that towards the end of the day, it's you, whether you cross the red lights or not. Because yes, there's no issue at all, but you still have got to do it because of your sense of loyalty, sense of responsibility as a loyal citizen, fulfilling your obligation, and of course the increased assets and all that. Next, please. And this is where I think fintech, we have got to look into more in terms of embedding, because currently in terms of finance, we have already embedded financial elements in all our operations. Almost everything, as long as it is within the fintech environment, we embed. So now we have got, moving forward in terms of enhancing our reform of tax reform, I think we should also talk about to have it embedded into consumer fintech. We talk about the gig economy. We talk about the crypto, and last but not least, we talk about the e-commerce. So once we have this in place, as I mentioned earlier, it has to be done in totality. Okay, next please. Okay, as you can see, these are the companies who are basically offering tax tag. Unfortunately, there's none from Malaysia. Are you saying that we don't need that? When everybody's moving towards technology, and everybody's moving towards the IR 4.0, but what are we doing? What are we? Because you can see from the bank's perspective, in fact, Bank Negara has just issued 5 digital banking, and what's happening to the tax? Because this is one of our sources of income, and yet we tend to put it aside. We tend to feel that, we will do it later. Because if you look at those companies, these are all foreign companies. Where are the Malaysian technologists? Where are the Malaysian fintechs? And next. So how do we move forward? As I mentioned, I think we discussed earlier, just that we need to focus. And of course, I don't want to talk about this, but as I said, I strongly agree with my fellow panelists. I think whatever we do, we need to have we have got to do it in totality. I think I hope I have completed the 8 minutes, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Muhammad Zakaria. And now we'll open questions to the members of the audience. Can I have the first question, please?
I think I'd just like to add on to, I think Chihaya was asking me, what are basically the challenges? Because I'm trying to look from both perspectives. Challenges for the authority to collect tax when it comes to IR 4.0. And by virtue that you can see, there are more and more high-end technologies, cryptos, which are very, to a certain extent, they are great to the old-timers. And on the other hand, the challenges of the taxpayer, how do you understand that? How do I actually apply this technology in terms of getting making sure that it's basically being served from end to end. I mean, that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. We have been given notice that we have 10 minutes left. May I take this opportunity to have our panel member to conclude something that, or something that you missed earlier on. I give, let us say, 2 minutes each. Can we start with Mr. Ranganathan?
Thank you, Jay. Yeah. So, yeah. No, when we go back to school, standard 3, standard 4, we have to. I think we have to introduce some interesting reliefs, tax reliefs to connect with your life. Because at the moment the reliefs are boring, not so young, and it's. I mean, generally, when people go for work at the age of 25, 26, or 23, 24, when there's a PCB, only then they know there's something called Lembaga Senda dan Negeri. So until then they don't know. So we can teach them at very young age. Not necessarily it should be syllabus. If IRB can do some engage, of course IRB do have a counter at Kidzania, but not everybody can go to Kidzania, right? So if IRB can do some engagements with schools along with MOE or in any manner, something in interactive manner, I think it will be really impactful and we can build a very good company.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ranganathan. Yeah, Mr. Awanjit Singh.
Sure. So thank you. I think I just want to maybe bring ourselves back. When we have these sessions, the panelists on stage usually make a lot of recommendations for improvement. And sometimes I think we forget that Malaysia, as far as tax administration is concerned and tax framework or tax policy is concerned, I think we're pretty much way ahead than many countries. I think we need to acknowledge that. So in EY, I'm always reminded because we have this group called the Tax Policy Group. It's a global network, right? And whenever I get the honor and privilege of attending some of those conferences, there's always a map, the world map, and they then break it up to see where different administrations sit, in terms of technology and all of that. And I'm not kidding, and I'm not saying it for the fun of it. The truth is, Malaysia usually will be on the top record. And I'll just remind ourselves, we went into self-assessment, I think, if I remember, back in 2000. Okay, and if we go back and remind ourselves and recall, I don't think there were many jurisdictions that were self-assessment. Today we do our filing, personal income tax. I think many of us can just do it online. It will probably take us less than 5 minutes to do it. Okay, so these are all the good things, and I don't want us to forget that. But at the same time, when we are up here, I think it's really about the way forward. And surely we cannot be just happy with where we are. We need to be better. And we need to grow and develop. And I think the suggestions that we made earlier, or rather I made earlier, is really about, hey, this is now the next step, this is the next level. We need to take the opportunity. Every challenge has an opportunity, and this is an opportunity for us to become even better than where we are.
Okay, I think from my side, I think moving forward, if you're talking about the government is pushing for the IR 4.0, I think everyone should be working together, not so much working in silo. The banking sector will do on their part, in the industry will be on their part, and so that's where it becomes a form of handicap. We talk about the banks, we talk about the central bank, they're very much focused. And we talk about the securities commissions, they are talking about the capital market. and they are moving towards this IR 4.0. And again, as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, the way I look at it from the fintech perspective, I mean, the tax part has always been left out. So unless and until we work in totality, we work as a group, inshallah, I think we will move forward towards the goal of achieving the development of the IR 4.0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would describe them as our tax gurus in Malaysia, because we cannot have, they are our top 10 leaders leading the innovation and disruption for the country. The two words that I can summarize here is, one is innovation, two is disruption. And with that, I leave the session to the management. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Yahya. All right, but panelists and moderator, please remain on stage, because right now we'd like to give a slight token of appreciation over to you guys. And for this, I'd like